Hey everyone, how you doing? It's Peter here, and it's time for the PDG Advertising Podcast, episode 20. Can you believe it? And today is May the 16th, 2019. So we're on episode 20, and that's pretty cool. That's a big achievement. I'm really pleased. So thanks to everybody who's listened. And yeah, let's get into it. So on the 20th episode of the PDG Advertising Podcast, the first thing that I have to talk about is tracking success and tracking failures and tracking what you're doing for your customers, tracking how you're trending across time. And time is a really interesting thing in advertising, because things take time. And what we found is that everything's an evolving process. So we don't know the right answer to this, but we do know some of the things that have worked for us and our customers. And those things I'd like to share. So when we talk about tracking things, how often do you track things? Taking a step back to, 2012 or 2010 maybe, a business that I worked in had this wonderful system of tracking, and the system would go right down to the second. So it tracked every second. It tracked performance across every single second. Now, we don't do that here at PDG Advertising. I was about to say we can't, and then I hesitated, but we couldn't do that. I can't imagine any business that as large as this or as small as this could do that. But I think that's where it needs to go to. I think that's where we need to go to, where we can track right down to the second, because things happen in a second. But right now, here's where we are on that spectrum. We track weekly. So we create dashboards for customers, pretty standard dashboard, and we track weekly what's going on. Now, I check in on everything at least daily, multiple times a day for a lot of things, but whenever we're presenting back to the customer, in order to see how things are going, you get a better picture right now of things over a week. Goodness, if we could go right down to the second, that would be great. And I guess in some ways, some of our analytics do that. Facebook probably does that, and Google probably does it as well. And that's where we take most of our data from. But as it stands, right now we track week on week. Now, the next stage of that, I think, will be tracking day on day. So that's important. But here's where I wouldn't call it the rub, but here's where the thought goes. Is it a good idea to track day on day, or is it better to look over months? Well, you can't look over, a month, because it takes ages for a month to happen. So by the time a month has happened, things might have gone downhill. So tracking week on week is better than tracking per month. But can you really just track week on week? You need to be monitoring things day on day. And whenever you're monitoring things day on day, sometimes you need to monitor them right down to the hour. And let's see if we ever get right down to the minute with PDG Advertising, which would be incredible. I think there is a value in a day on day report. There is a value in a week on week report. And there is a value in a month-on-month report. So there's also a value in a year-on-year report. So, a day-on-day report tells you whether yesterday's changes worked and whether things are going well today. And it also tells you if things start to go down or things start to go really badly quickly, instead of waiting for a week to check it up. A weekly report gives you a broader view and tells you how things are going over a whole week, and whether you did better week on week than the week before. So that gives you a better, broader handle. And the same idea, the monthly gives you that broader handle as well. Now, I don't think we really track month on month enough. We definitely track week on week enough. That's where our focus is. And I think that allows you to make good business decisions, which is really what tracking is about, making better business decisions and us enabling our customers to make better business decisions. And I tell you what, that's interesting. Better business decisions. If you're following us on Instagram or on Facebook, I can guarantee you that that's going to filter into our content, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. So when we're tracking, and we're tracking over, you might have noticed that there's a bit of a skip in the podcast there. I actually stopped the podcast so I could write down better business decisions. So that's great. I wanted to just share what we do. And we track weekly. And I've gone through before the type of things that we track weekly. Facebook spend, what adverts are doing well, the sales made in the week, the return on investment every week, the hits on the website, returning visitors, e-commerce rates, emails, unsubscribe rates, all of those things that are important to the customer. There's no standard customer, so there's no standard dashboard, but that's what we do weekly. And I think that we're going to evolve over time. Over time, we're going to include a monthly report so we can see this is how we're doing on the week, but this is how we're doing overall on the month. Because you can have a bad week, you can have a bad day, you can probably have a bad month as well, but over time, the trend should always be upwards. It's really interesting in our one of our South African customers. I was beating myself up about it, saying, we're not doing as well as we did the last week. And this is a few weeks ago. But then we look back a year ago and we increased the key KPIs by like 500% from the year before, with not even remotely the equivalent higher spend. And it puts it into perspective when you see how far that you have come in a year. And again, that only comes with experience. So that's something to think about, being able to look, how did we do this day a year ago? How did we do yesterday? How did we do a week ago? Time is interesting concept for a start, but there's different, a day-on-day report, a week-on-week report, and a month-on-month report. They're different. A year-on-year report, they're different, but they're all valuable. So I think that in PDG advertising in the future, we're going to have to expand out that reporting. And taking a step back, I suppose if we want to expand out that reporting, going back to the company that I worked in that had reports down to the minute, we need to get a proper reporting team. And that reporting team starts with a reporting person. So, right now it's myself and Anthony and a number of contractors across the world, but I wonder what that reporting area looks like. And I think it's a very important one. So that's something that I will be introducing in the future to PDG Advertising's roster. Yeah, today a lot of stuff was happening, a lot of stuff was going on, and I found myself in the midst of a little bit of, I wouldn't call it hecticness, maybe busyness. It was certainly something was going on and everything was kind of moving very quickly. And it's really cool because we found a good technique to declutter that path to getting things right and becoming productive again. Because I don't think you're productive whenever things are coming at you from all angles. I don't think you're effective whenever that's happening. So in order to be effective, just take a step back and decided, right, we need to take things step by step here. Do one thing, move on, do one thing, move on, do one thing, move on. And that was very helpful. And I don't know if you're ever feeling, overwhelmed by stuff and that, it's always good to take that little step back and say, look, let's take this number one, what do we need to do? Take number two, what do we need to do? And take number three, what do we need to do? What are the three most important things? And get them done and then move on to the next ones. Because I don't know. I don't think that people can multitask. There's an argument about men and women being able to multitask and men not being able to multitask. I can only speak for myself. I know that I can't. And I know my strength doesn't lie there. It lies in being able to identify individual tasks and do them well. So that was quite important today, to take that step back and do things in a step-by-step fashion. And just something leading on from that, during that step-by-step, don't get me wrong, whenever you plan out something and you try to do it step-by-step, sometimes you can just get lost in what you're doing and you can veer into what you probably call autopilot. And I think that, my dad is a driving instructor and he taught me and teaches people to, whenever you're driving, don't slip into autopilot. Don't be thinking about, what you're going to have for your dinner, or don't be thinking about what what that person said that annoyed you in work, or don't be thinking about, what your girlfriend said to upset you the night before, because you're in a car and it's a weapon of a thing and you really need to, focus on it. So he says, get out of autopilot and bring yourself back the road and focus on it and concentrate on it and do it really well. It's kind of enjoyable. to stop just drifting into autopilot and, doing things just because that's the way you do them. So concentrating on that will make you a better driver. And I think the same applies in work and advertising and what you're doing. So that happened today where I had to sort of slap myself into get off autopilot, get this done and move on. What does happen sometimes is you can be distracted in digital advertising because there's so many different ways to do things and so many options, and it's so new, and there's no proper path, and nobody really knows the right way to do things. And it means that you can be diverted off, but you must attempt to keep the goal in mind and keep the customer in mind and keep moving towards what it is that you're trying to do. Because if you don't, you end up all day taking all day to do things, and that doesn't help. That's really important, to take things step by step. When you start to get lost in what you're doing and veer off into that autopilot, it's important to snap yourself out of it. I'm sure there's 100 tips on how to snap yourself out of it quickly, but I don't know what they are. I just know that whenever it starts happening to me, I can quite quickly snap myself out of it. So that was quite important today. Yeah, I thought it would be interesting to share what happens in our weekly reporting. So it's coming to the end of the week, so today and tomorrow is taken up with some weekly reporting that we do for our customers. So it's really important to send through a weekly report via email is normally best for our customers. And I have gone with a kind of a format like so, where subject line introduces what the email is. And I'm going into this much detail because I think it's important, because I think all of the different aspects of this are important. The subject line is always, first of all, the people that it's going to. I don't put that in first because as I'm creating the email, sometimes you can slip and hit the send button. So I leave that to the last. But the people that go into it are the customers and the key stakeholders. Remember a few episodes back, we talked about keeping key stakeholders involved. This is it. Keeping people engaged. This is it. And focusing on the goals that we have. This is it. Actually, that's probably something that's good. We don't put goals, what our goals are, into the weekly reporting updates. We probably should. We probably should put that in and show where we are so that we can start to move towards it. I'm a very big advocate of keeping everybody involved and informed. So I don't mind so much that we put in lots of email addresses to the to field, because I think it's better to over-communicate than under-communicate. Then in the subject line, it's important, because think about the amount of emails you get per day. It's good to make sure that that's clear and concise and says what it is. So we normally put in something like whatever the client name is, and then the weekly report from PDG Advertising, so it knows what it is, weekly report, and then it's from us at PDG. A little bit of brand in there as well in someone's eyeline. Even a customer of ours' eyeline is fine as well. And in the body, we're always polite. We usually put in like the owner of the business's name or our key point of contact. As in, hi, let's say that customer was called, what name could we give this customer? That's awesome, a really awesome name. We're going to call him Max. It's a really strong name. So hi, Max, and team, because it's not just for Max, but Max is the main point of contact. So we put in hi, Max, and team. And then under it, we give a very immediate intro into the email, and it could be only 8 words. It's just a kind of to set the tone of where we are. If things are going well and there's no massive issues, then we outline that at the very start of the email in a sentence. If things aren't going well, then we'll put in what action needs to take and what our recommended moves are, and whether we need to meet up sooner than when our scheduled meeting is. And by the way, these updates are used on our weekly meetings, and they go through each of these different points in the weekly meeting. So it's kind of like we're preparing people for a conversation that we're going to have. And it gives people, we usually send it a day before, so it gives people an opportunity. Now, don't get me wrong, I have sent this out like seconds before the meeting starts, and that's bad practice. But now we've got into kind of a rhythm of making sure that the reports go out a day before we're due to meet the business for a catch up. The next thing we have in there are like 4 or 5 bullet points from our dashboard that we create weekly, and they're like the key areas, so that if the customer doesn't have time to read, we highlight things that are going well and things that are going wrong. Things that are going wrong are kind of more important than things that are going well, because it's a point to identify those. The problem is that people might want to self-promote in these areas, and that's not a good idea. Here is the place where we should be trustworthy and say, look, this is what's going wrong, and this is what needs to happen to get it right. And then under those bullets, we put in the full report so that people can hyperlink through to the full report. Most times with customers, there's a few other key areas that we're working on, like projects that we're working on. And with that, below those bullet points, we then put in like the header of the project that we're working on. So one might be Facebook adverts or Google ads or website development or app development. And we give a little update on how that's going. At the bottom, we always say, if there's anything else that you need, just let us know and we'll go through it. It shows we care. Emails are always branded with our nice signature at the bottom, and we send them out in that way. And I don't know, I've never had someone complain about getting a report. I've always had people appreciating the reports. We don't really get reports like that from people that we work with. I hope that that's a mark of quality. And I'm sure that it brings us closer to our goals of customer growth, quality of service, and brand awareness. So that's really, really important. And we enjoy creating them. And it's something that we're going to continue to do. We'll probably utilize some sort of technology in the future, but I've never found one that encompasses that, where it can send out the reports properly, where it pulls in all the important data. And I wonder if it's just because businesses are so different that there is no one size fits all for them, and whether or not you'd ever get something that works for, a business that has so many different facets to it, and how businesses are so different. But who knows? In time, we might create our own reporting solution based on what we do, because I feel it works really well. So you noticed that I stopped in the middle of this podcast to write down something, and that was better business decisions. So I expect that better business decisions will be a post that we'll do online, or it could be it could be another blog, or it could be a video, or it could be anything. But it's a little piece of content that actually has come from this podcast, like literally on this podcast, that has come from this podcast, and is really valuable in my opinion. And that was one of the points I wanted to make today, that this podcast is actually helping to create content. If you look at our Instagram and Facebook feeds today, you will see that there is something on there about loving your brand. And it's because of yesterday on the podcast, I realized how much I'm enjoying working with the brand and working with our brand and figuring out its personality and its colors and all of those different things. So there is something magical about that, and I'm very happy about it. So I wanted to share it with you. If you ever created a podcast, you get these unknown benefits from it, and that's really, really cool. So everyone, we're up to 20 minutes, and that is very fitting for the PDG Advertising Podcast episode 20. Next week's episode will have a different cover photo. You can see that on YouTube. And as always, I wish you the best in your business, in your work, whatever it is that you do or want to do. And we'll be back tomorrow, Friday, for episode 21 of the PDG Advertising Podcast. Have a great rest of your day.